Welcome back to Weekend Breakfast with me, David Bull. The time 7:21. Behave, Rennie Hennigan. It's Sunday, February the 19th. Thank you very much indeed for all your lovely messages, actually. I will just read a couple of these out. This is from We Need a New Leader. Happy breakfast birthday, Dr. David. We all knew what Sunak would do with Northern Ireland. He's no true Brexiteer. We don't need Sunak, Hunt or Boris. We need IDS, Redwood, Mogg or Anderson. Sunak blocked Article 16 when Frost and Truss tried to trigger it. Sunak is toast. Happy anniversary. A little poem to mark your occasion, David. He landed on talk like a tornado on our screens. His joyous personality was a viewer's dream. His energy and sense was a joy to behold. Don't ever change, David. The public are sold. Really lovely. Thank you very much indeed. And Alison in Suffolk. Oh, that was Jackie. Thank you very much indeed, Jackie. Alison in Suffolk says, good morning, David and Rennie. Happy 1 year talk anniversary. You are two of my favourite presenters. Looking forward to a great show. As for Boris, he should keep quiet and leave Rishi to get on with it. But then the papers love it when past prime ministers get involved in these things. And one more, I will just do one more. VJ Bond says, David, I watch your show every week. I love you and Renee. Could you please do a shout out for my son, Nicholas, who has just graduated with honours from university? Very good. Last night we had the graduation party and we are all very proud, exactly as you should be. Actually, one more. Stu says, a great late night bedtime listening with Dr. Hunderkamp and David Bull on TalkTV. I'm listening here in Edmonton, in Canada. Wow, amazing. Shout out, please, to all of the UK expats worldwide. I am really missing home, but I love the show. Thank you very much. That's so nice, so nice, so nice. Talking of so nice, joining us this morning to take us through this morning's papers is Andrew Eborn, barrister and broadcaster, but without your wig. Where's your wig?
I'm so sorry. It was too much toupee. See what I did there? Thank you. I'm here all week. But I brought some poppers because it's the 1 year anniversary. Hey! Look at that. You were so disappointed. That was the popper, weren't you?
And they say barristers aren't theatrical.
I know. It's an absolute joy. But many congratulations. It is one of my highlights of the year is coming on. We did Christmas together while you were sick. And then you were sick, and there was somebody else's Penny Smith here. I've done it all.
We've been sick for months.
I know. But what I love about you share everything. So when I came on last year, you had like red eye, and then you caught the red eye, and then you got some lurgy something, and then you gave it. I love it. It's the sharing and caring community.
I told you we spend too much time.
It's a thrill.
Right, shall we look through this morning's papers? I mean, this big story, obviously, I talked about it briefly this morning, Northern Ireland Protocol. It's actually pretty much everywhere, isn't it? What's your take?
It's Johnson is wanting to make sure he's in the headlines again, is my take on it.
Is it?
I think it is, because you suddenly turn around, Rishi's there trying to sort something out. It is incredibly important that the peace process is not upturned again. And I think the whole Northern Ireland and that sort of side and the difficulties there, we have to handle this incredibly sensitively. We don't know yet what the deal is from Rishi. He's toyed around with some things, hasn't he? And Boris has come in, and you think, well, why has he come in at this stage? Has he sensed a sort of moment of weakness for Rishi that he can basically use it for his own advantages? Is my take on it. What do you think?
I would agree with you. Also, but you see, well, I would agree with you, but also at the same time, obviously I'm a Brexiteer. I was incensed by the fact that they're briefing that all 7 tests have been met, and as I said yesterday, and I have all 7 here, which were the DUP's red lines. The first one is to fulfil Article 6 of the Act of Union. As you know, as a barrister, that means that every single part should be treated equally. That does not currently happen. No diversion of trade, no border in the Irish Sea. We currently have a border in the Irish Sea. Also, give the people of Northern Ireland in the say in the laws that govern them. Also goes on to no checks between Northern Ireland and GB, and indeed the other way round, and no regulatory borders between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. Now, as far as I can see, it doesn't meet those.
Well, you're absolutely right. It doesn't. It's that simple. As far as anybody can see, it's very clearly set out. This is the difficulty, is how it's going to play out. Rishi has now got to show his political hand and say, look, this is what we've done. They say, we're not quite there yet, but let's turn around and say, this might be the deal to make it make sense. It is better. And obviously America, we've got to look at our friends in Edmonton. Beautiful part of the world. I love Canada, by the way. The whole of Canada, I love it all. But America are looking on and say, look, we'd like you to do a deal, because it's much better that way, rather than this sort of Damocles, if you like, which we currently have with the protocol. So if we can do a deal, the devil will be in the detail.
But
All I would urge is that you don't upset the whole peace process.
But I actually think that the detail is being leaked and briefed quite extensively, and that's why Boris has intervened. I don't doubt for a second that he sees some political mileage to gain, but I also think he sees a really bad deal, even worse than the one he did, being done here.
But here's the thing that I cannot still square. Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. He was partly responsible. Well, he did do it. I mean, he signed us up to, and I voted, remember, I was in the European Parliament and I voted with my fingers over my nose because we knew it wasn't a great deal, but it was either we voted for some sort of deal or no deal, and we knew that we couldn't risk that.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And he got the 80-seat majority on the one soundbite.
He got it because
Brexit done.
But he got it because we also, Reform UK actually stood candidates down as a result because we believed that he would carry it through, and he didn't.
But we must remember that this Northern Ireland Protocol was Theresa May, and I believe that she did it in such a way because she knew it would be the step back into the EU.
Do you? I think she just didn't get it right. I think she was played.
People play in politics. I think you're right. I think what happens and this is the interesting thing, is the shenanigans that go on behind the scenes. But you know, and you know how it sort of works on that basis. There's a lot of political mileage in this weakness, if you like. So all sorts of the heavyweights are coming out. And as you say, whenever there's a fight, it's the P.T. Barnum thing. If you want to draw a crowd, start a fight.
You know who's been very quiet in all of this? David Frost.
He'll come out.
You say that he did appear, didn't he, during the week? He has actually said, he's been making overtones about saying, you've got to get this deal right. And actually, I think it was Frost that said, you shouldn't be pushed by the anniversary, and also not Biden.
And he's right. He's absolutely
of course he's right.
But I think he needs to be louder at the moment. I think he's a sensible voice. He knows it inside out. He knows the detail.
So what would that voice say then? If he comes out, which he will come out, I predict he will come out this week and say something, what would he say?
I think what the voice should say is that there is no compromise on the Northern Ireland Protocol. It doesn't work.
Well, it doesn't work. And the thing is, this is the whole point, which is we actually probably should trigger Article 60.
Yes.
Because the fact is, the EU, as we know, and you know this as a barrister, you know, at the end of the day, you have to have a compromise. If the parties can't compromise, you have a ruling.
Yes, absolutely. And it says, George or not war, let's turn around. But I just say, the devil be in the detail. Let's see what actually comes out. We've had all sorts of leaked things, which might give us a little sense of what's going to happen. But I reckon over the next few days, something vital is going to happen on that sort of basis.
So do I. What's your bet?
My bet is that Rishi has to re-own the narrative. He's got to, because it's a weakness now, and Boris has come out as the big gun behind big dog. You make that make sense. Rishi has now got to show he's in charge. He's got to turn around and say, look, here's the deal, this is what's going to happen, and it's a benefit for the following reason.
You see, Sunak could be in serious trouble over this.
He would be if he doesn't control the narrative now. So that's what I think he's... All his advice, and you know how it works behind the scenes. Boris has got all over the papers today. Rishi's got to come over the papers in the next few days with, we've got the solution, this is it, it's going to benefit all people, going back to the rule of 7 and make that make sense.
I mean, I still think it's extraordinary that actually when you poll Remainers, they're now saying we can't compromise. Because we've reached this position, we voted to leave, and even if you voted to remain, many people are saying, look, actually it was the democratic will of the people, and actually when we do this, we need to do it properly. And quite frankly, you cannot have a foreign power adjudicating on matters reserved to the United Kingdom.
It's one of the basic things, isn't it? The trouble is people didn't really understand what it meant, and that was the difficulty. When you do soundbite politics, get Brexit done, that's what happens. And I think there are so many complicated things to untangle, and this is one of the most sensitive.
I would agree. Right, let's move on. People, obviously, we've talked a great deal about the crisis in work. We can't lure people back into work, can we? There's a brilliant story, isn't there?
We absolutely love this. And so one of the great excuses at the moment, and one of the fantastic, we've never let us down, the Daily Star, I can't get to work today, Chief, as I've been abducted by aliens. That's what you want. That's what you want.
I did tell you my story.
Come on, tell us your story.
So when I was the publisher of Attitude magazine many years ago, one of my staff members went missing for a week, literally didn't hear from him, didn't see him, and when he finally came in and I sat him down in my office to say, where have you been? And it was a lot more of a tougher environment then. He said, I'm really so sorry. I was kidnapped.
But did you ask why? Was it an alien, though?
It wasn't an alien. It wasn't an alien.
I mean, it is extraordinary, these excuses. I mean, how could you even think you could
It's
get away
something
with
I've E10, is what they've said.
You know, I actually had another member of staff who
Yes.
disappeared for a long period of time, and he was in prison.
Oh, my goodness. Did he not send a little sick note?
And you know, I kept his job open for him. For
Oh,
when
how he was in
he
for
was in
life?
for 3 months.
So despite your appearances, you're really nice, actually. Let's move on. This is, I mean, maybe we should have done that later as
Yeah.
it's a flippant story, but this is a very serious story about the number of children left waiting for surgery on the NHS.
That's absolutely right, and it's in the eye, and they're talking about the sick children left to suffer as wait for the care for the NHS soars. What they're saying is that more than 350,000 children are in urgent need of operations, and they quote about a girl who's 6 has brain surgery cancelled over staff shortages, and there's some particular examples. It is appalling, and it's good to be with 2 doctors to get your views on that, but the whole sort of principle is that when you start to personalise, we get numb, if you like, to these sort of stories about waiting lists and so on and so forth. The way that you avoid people getting numb is to personalise it. And you talk about a particular case, say, well, here is this tragic case of a girl who's 6, she needed brain surgery, it was cancelled as a result of it. This is what these horrendous statistics mean. There's a number of solutions, and I often talk, virtually every time I come on the show, about AI and how we might be able to utilise that to speed up some of the processes.
Like what?
Well, if you had every doctor's surgery in the world basically would have access to the greatest research, and you can pre-diagnose much earlier as a result of the benefit of that research, that would help reduce waiting times, wouldn't it? Because if prevention is better than cure, and the other thing is also how quickly you would escalate a particular case. If you can get
I have a
computerized...
feeling you may be contradicted.
I have a
No,
feeling,
by
I have a
Renee.
feeling this is why.
Yes, but I think that's because of the way that the NHS is structured. We are a problem-based service, and so we look for problems, whereas in other countries they do practice preventative medicine, and I'm all for it. But then that goes all the way back to children, and there's a story today about our children have the worst diets in the world, our toddlers. And
Processed food, I read that.
processed food.
Yeah.
So, you know, we need to go right back to basics, and we need to start making people healthy from when they're young. My problem with this story is that I think, well, it's not a problem, I think it's a shocking problem, but we need to look at the NHS again and decide what it's going to do, because there are many operations that are going on the NHS on a daily basis which are not urgent, are not children, and we need to decide what our priorities are. And in my mind, children, cancer, the elderly, mental health and accidents should be our 5 priorities. Everything else waits until we're...
Tell me those again for children.
Children, cancer, the elderly, mental health, accident emergency, and obviously long-term condition management.
Absolutely. We do not disagree at all. I would absolutely... And what we're trying to say is that when you're looking at it, it's not just about money, it's about dealing with those inefficiencies as well. So if you deal on that sort of basis, that's why I say we can embrace technology, could help with some of those inefficiencies.
I'm just slightly reticent with technology. I think there's a role for it. But, you know, things like telemetry at home, I think, plays a role. But someone has to interpret the data that's coming back for a start.
And it's no good if it stops at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, yes, we saw that story, didn't we? Yeah, that's right. Of course, you can't have anyone actually interpreting it overnight. But actually, isn't there a bigger issue here, which is, don't we need a contract with the people to say that actually the NHS will provide these services? This is our contract to you.
This is our core.
This is our core service. This is our contract. If we deviate from that, you can basically have a go at us.
Yes. No, I think that's right. If you give people, here are your milestones, then you can hold people to account as a result of it. And so when looking at wages, and everybody deserves a fair wage, we talked about that previously, basically put those milestones in as well. Talk about key performance indicators without the sort of naff comments and so on and so forth. But you can then measure things, and we can measure those improvements. But those inefficiencies do need to be addressed, and the more that we can talk about it, especially with those who are doctors and say this is what we need, there are inefficiencies, we admit to those, let's do something about it.
Well, I think it always comes back to the same point. It always comes back to, in its current form, the NHS is not working, it's broken, it needs to be reformed.
But who's going to do that?
You and me.
Well, I know that, but apart from us, because this is the problem. It's so fragmented, isn't it? And you've got all of these trusts and bigger units, and then you've got layers and layers of bureaucracy and all the rest of it. And actually, to reform it is so complicated. I agree, it has to be done. But actually, you know, I've said before, I've worked at the BBC and I've worked in the NHS, and the two organisations are remarkably similar. Both started around the same time. The levels of structure and bureaucracy very similar. Yesterday we talked about the BBC licence fee changing and then having core services and then services you pay for. Now, isn't that actually what possibly we should be saying for the NHS?
Absolutely. And you will know, because we're a member of the Royal Television Society, I hosted. I thank you both.
Thanks to you,
I get it, absolutely.
Yeah,
You're very welcome, Mr. Joy. But I hosted the 100 years of the BBC, what happens in the next 100. And we talked to Greg Dyke about that sort of side. And within the audience, we had somebody from the NHS, quite high up, who said, actually, the comparison between the NHS and the BBC is exactly right. So you're bang on the money there.
But it's extraordinary. So when I joined the BBC, literally the buildings were the same, the infrastructure was the same, the levels of bureaucracy were the same.
And I think what's really interesting is that people are tiring of the BBC now, and I think they're tiring of the NHS being our, you know, deity that we worship at the feet of.
But the great thing is we can do something about it. And,
Yes.
and it's not
we
just
must.
us in this room.
But we must.
People at home can realise this is the issue. There are efficiencies to be made. Look at AI. Look at technology in a sensible way to make that make sense. But also let's address the issues, not just fair pay, which we have to look at, but also get those inefficiencies dealt with.
Yeah, let's move on now. Charlie and the censorship factory.
Oh, extraordinary, isn't it? So, poor old Roald Dahl. Augustus Gloop can't be fat, and Mrs. Crunchball's face is no longer horsey. So what's happening is you are no longer. This is what the wonderful publishers are saying. There's a note on the copyright page of good old Roald Dahl. We all grew up on these wonderful books, saying this book was written many years ago, and so we regularly review the language to ensure that it can continue to enjoy it all to this day. So they've given a few examples. You can no longer call the chap fat, so Augustus Gloop can no longer be fat.
But he is fat.
He is fat, I know, but he has to be referred to as enormous. So you can't call him
That's
fat.
worse, isn't it?
Miss Trenchball cannot be her great horsey face. She just has a face now, as opposed to a horsey face. So all of this language is.
But you know that
changed.
Oompa Loompas aren't allowed to be small anymore.
They're not allowed. Or green.
And cloud
or,
men.
Or,
Green.
or orange.
Cloud
Exactly.
men are cloud people. You know, as a parent, once again, we are disengaging parents from the responsibility for their children. I will decide what my children read, and I will decide if it's suitable. My son, when I used to read him Roald Dahl, I'm going to say this, his favourite sentence ever was that Grandma had a mouth like a puckered up dog's bottom.
There you were.
he loved it.
Because it's so visceral, and you
it's
can.
wonderful.
I mean, it paints a picture, doesn't it?
It does. It's like the bulldog licking the nettle. You remember in Fools and Horses?
Yeah.
That's what you have. You need to have language. Is our greatest tool. Do not take that
But
away from people.
there's another story doing the rounds this morning about David Williams. They're now talking about actually changing all of his books.
Who's another brilliant children's writer,
He is.
actually. He really is.
And we talked about this story actually yesterday because you were saying, and I thought about it this morning weirdly when I got up, about what did you call them? Fizzy?
Oh, God.
Fizz
Fizz whizzers.
Fizz whizzers.
Wizards, yes.
Which
That's
are,
in BFG.
yeah,
Oh,
fizz,
there you go.
Bottom burps.
which are bottom birds.
There you go.
They're funny.
They are funny. People love body sounds.
See, children
They do.
love this, and this
They do.
This is because the horrible drink that the giant drinks, the bubbles go downwards.
Yes.
So instead of burping, he does a fizz whiz,
Which is funny.
And children love
And
this.
adults love it as well. In fact, we're all giggling.
We all
watching it.
want our
That's another
children. We want our children to be educated. We want them to be engaged.
entertain, enjoy language. There are certain things, if you remember Agatha Christie, the original name of her, Then There Were None, used the N-word. So
I
it had
know
to
it
be
did.
changed.
Yes.
And I get that.
I get that too.
I think the other stuff, however, let's embrace language because that's what we want.
I'm deeply worried. We're changing our lexicon. We're changing our entirety of language.
Yeah.
And it's not just how language usually evolves, which is the occasional word here and there changes. Our dictionary is rewritten.
Yeah.
Common language comes into play. This is a concerted effort to change our language forever.
Yeah. And I'd be fascinated because the great British public all watching at home, nobody misses an episode of this glorious show. I'd be interested if anybody supports this.
I can't imagine.
I can't imagine anybody does. If they do, they should get in touch.
They should indeed. And next story for?
I'll tell you what, this is a lovely story. You remember last year when we had all celebrated the Jubilee, there was a wonderful artist called Eleanor Tomlinson. We were talking about E.T., this is the different E.T. Eleanor Tomlinson, she was the person who created that iconic image of the Queen holding the hands with Paddington Bear.
Oh, that was so lovely.
And it went around the world, and it was ripped off. So lots of people started putting it on merchandise and various other people. So I was invited onto another channel to talk about copyright and so on and so forth. And I met Eleanor virtually. We talked about how she could be protected, and I offered to help her. So we have now combined forces, and I'm looking at doing lots of licensing deals around the world. So we've got a big deal with a puzzle manufacturer. I've done a deal for her in Japan as the new...
With the same image?
With different images. So she's now coming up with that sort of stuff. She's got a wonderful, rich body of work. And in the next few days, on Tuesday, Pancake Day, she's going to be releasing her coronation image. And she's been drip-feeding those sort of images around the world. But we've already got this to make sure she's
Have you seen the coronation
I have.
image?
It is fantastic. You will love it. So we'll get you... We'll reveal it here as well.
So I just saw something whiz past on the screen. There it is. There it is now.
So they're teasing it. So these are little teasers of what's going to become with the coronation image, Eleanor Tomlinson, and it is a glorious image which will be revealed at 6:05. I can tell you, because the 6th of the 5th, which is the coronation day, on Pancake Day on Tuesday. It also happens to be Archie's birthday, very coincidentally. So celebrate both. So it works well.
And also for me, that they're just so beautifully crafted, aren't they? There's something very, very British about this.
Yeah, it actually does.
And actually, if you think about the link here with books like Dahl and Quentin Blake...
Yes, they're very similar, actually.
And the illustration. Part of the words, the words are part of the appeal, but also the illustration.
Yeah.
It's a critical part of the story.
Of course, and the fact that it went viral around the world, but this time properly protected, looking after artists' rights. People should realise that copyright is like a property right like any others. You cannot just take an image which belongs to somebody else without permission. So that's what we're doing. We set this whole thing up for Eleanor. It's a glorious publication. It's going to be all over the world. Lots of deals have been announced next week. Watch this space.
Aren't you clever?
Thank you. It's my job to be clever. It's going to be good. But the only thing I don't do is modesty. So we work on that. But I'm delighted for Eleanor, and she's such a lovely person. She's only 25. Is she? An incredible talent. Really proud of her East Yorkshire roots. Doing lots of local deals where she can, as well as look at the international side.
Amazing. We need to look after creatives, though.
Just a couple of years younger than us.
Celebrate our anniversary of our 21st. Absolutely.
Quite. Andrew, thank you so much.
Thank you, and I should finish on a popper. There you go. And happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Happy TalkTV birthday. Thank you very much, Andrew. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. I shall remove the streamers from my hair. Or maybe not, actually. It's quite a look. After the break, we'll take your calls, your thoughts, and your messages. This is TalkTV broadcasting live from Central London.